In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Don't be shy.
NASA runs a secret space program. It's called India.
Come on, you can shake it.
Yeah.
The moon is made of cheese. Goat cheese.
Cersei.
Anything goes at Paratopia. And welcome.
You're listening to 105.3 New Orleans.
Paratopia. It's Jeff, it's Jer. It's Jeff and Jer. I may sound a little different because I'm on a Paratopia whale watch right now. So I'm literally phoning it in. I'm phoning the show in, as we're prone to do in our later episodes when we get big and famous and crotchety. In any event, we have a very special guest, Angelia Joiner, who you all know from The Joiner Report. That's her own special radio show, but probably you know her more so from the Stephenville sightings. She's the reporter, and I don't remember the paper, and I don't have it in front of me because that's all part of phoning it in. But I'm sure she'll tell us what paper it was she worked for out there. A bunch of people saw a giant mile-long triangular craft, and they got a little wacky, and she got an award for it from Stephen Bassett. Without further ado, Angelia Joiner. Is that all about right?
That's all about right, yes.
Okay, excellent. You're still a reporter, just not with that paper.
Right. I freelance for most of the time for the Abilene Reporter News, of course, in Abilene, Texas. The paper that I worked at when the big UFO story broke in January of 2008 was the Stephenville Empire Tribune, but I'm not there any longer.
Okay. And so the thing
I come home.
Yeah.
Do what?
I was going to say the thing that really interests us about you, or me anyway, I should speak for me, is that you are an outsider to this UFO stuff, and you've sort of stuck to it. And I guess you don't really have to. I mean, if you're still a reporter for a newspaper, there's no reason for you to do a UFO podcast or anything like that, except that it's intriguing you. What is it about this stuff that has so caught your attention that you've stuck with it past the original Stephenville shenanigans?
Well, before the sighting happened, I really didn't even know there was such a thing as a UFO community. I didn't realize that there were sightings all over the world almost on a daily basis. And so I remember one thing at the paper, I kept getting this email from this guy named Timothy Good, and he kept wanting me to get his book, and I kept thinking, who is this guy? Why does he want me to get his book, And
I should try that. Here, I want you to buy my book.
He was trying to help me. He was trying to help me. He was trying to say, there's a lot of information in there that would help me to understand what was happening. And as you know, the story went international in about 4 or 5 days. And the whole thing was just so intriguing to me. And then as we went along and Robert Powell and Glenn Schultz began working on the Stephenville radar report, well, that FOIA was sent off in February, so I stayed interested then because they would include me on all of their emails back and forth, and they needed me to help them with the witnesses and things like that. So when it really came down to it that, yes, the radar confirmed that there really was some sort of unknown object here that confirmed 8 of the witnesses in time and direction, that wowed me. I was like, oh my gosh, there really was something here, and I already knew that, but it just helped kind of solidify things. And as we went along and worked on that radar report, I just got more and more interested, and people were sending me information from all over the place. I was getting emails from all over the world, and then they started asking me to speak and things like that, and it just opened up a whole new culture to me.
Mm-hmm. So, anything weird about it? Now that you've been here and been able to look around and see what's what, is there anything, I don't know, how would you compare, for instance, working in a paranormal field to working at a paper? How are the people? Are they different? Anything like that?
Well,
just sort of
to me, the paranormal field or the UFO field, I don't really deal too much with all things paranormal. But it's a lot more interesting than a school board meeting. And I covered a lot of those for the paper. And, I have met some of the most intelligent people that I've ever met. And I think before this happened, I probably had sort of I don't know what you would want to call it, not really a bias, but I guess I really did think that probably people that were into this sort of thing weren't real grounded. But I found out that was not the case. I mean, people with doctorates, with 30 years of research into this, that, astronauts, people that are considered American heroes, I consider the astronauts American heroes, just from all walks of life. And what I found out really was there's not that many kooks in it. Like some people that didn't know about it, like I didn't, might think, but that's really not the case.
Mm-hmm. Jeff?
Now, I have been approached by some people that, were not exactly, I don't know what to call it.
Sane?
They were a little different,
Well, yeah, that's why I was just sort of jokingly saying, Jeff, maybe he'd like to chime in on whether or not they're crazy people. Is the Michael Salla thing something that you can talk about or no?
Well, I don't know what Michael Salla thing you're referring to, but...
that he had mailed or called your newspaper to try to get your job back?
Oh, yeah, he sent a letter.
Let's set this up, because Michael Salla is part of the exopolitical movement, which we here at Paratopia like to take cheap shots at all the time. So, without further ado, here's a Michael Salla story.
Well, at that time, I didn't know who Michael Salla was either. I mean, I didn't know who anybody was. So after I had left the newspaper, the publisher called me. This is kind of a weird story, but there was somebody that worked for the newspaper that had already asked me to speak at a local civic club. And I had already agreed to that, so, I was going to do that. And because she had his phone number, she called me up at this luncheon that I was speaking at, over his phone, and said, what is the deal? People are saying that we fired you. We are being inundated with phone calls and emails and faxes. Can you stop this? And I think she said so was the city, City Hall office in Stephenville.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found out that one of the things that was done was Michael Salla had written a letter on my behalf asking them to apologize to me. It was a fairly long letter. I don't remember it word for word now. Asking them to apologize to me and to give my job back to me. But I didn't want my job back, and it was a very uncomfortable place for me to be in. And so once she called me, I said, look, I don't know how this is all happening, but, I will do what I can, and that's all I can do. And I did put out the word then, please don't call the newspaper, please don't email them or fax them, because I don't want to go back to work there.
Yeah, well, that must be kind of weird. I mean, did you know him at all before that?
No, I did not know him at all. But, I did not know many of these people. Like Grant Cameron has turned out to be a very close friend of mine. And I will say that the UFO community, when all that happened, I mean, they really welcomed me with open arms and really embraced me. And it was really surprising to me. And so did those witnesses. The main witnesses, I think I will probably remain in touch with for the rest of my life. That would be Steve Allen, Ricky Sorrells, the Constable Leroy Gayton, and I think, we'll always talk and always be friends. And that's sort of how, the UFO community has been very special people. Like I met you, Jeremy, at the X conference.
That's right. Well,
in 2008.
So you're the sexiest woman in ufology. You know this. That's why we all gravitate toward you.
I'm the what?
I said you're the sexiest woman in ufology. That's why we all gravitate toward you.
Oh,
I'm trying to tell you this, but you ignore me. You ignore my advances. It must be because you're married or something. I hate that.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that be. I am married. But, that's nice of you to say. But, I remember being out on that patio with you and talking to you, and you were sharing, your story with me and everything that's happened with you. And I just found the people to be so warm and so kind, and I've really enjoyed it. And I do want to stay in touch with people, and I do think it's a very interesting phenomena. Something is going on. I mean, you have 10 F-16s up in the air in Stephenville. At the same time, an unknown and an AWAC is in the area for 4 hours. So I'd like to be the one that finds out what is that thing? What is happening?
Well, yeah, and let's stick with this for just 1 second, because you had mentioned the radar report, and is this the same radar report that someone from MUFON had come on TV and said, well, we haven't really looked at this yet, we don't know what it means, but it looks like there were thousands of objects in the sky that night? Does this ring a bell for anyone?
That must not be the same. Now, when we broke the news of the radar report being completed, it was on Larry King Live in July of 2008. Right. But it was never thousands of objects being found or something like that. Now, in our area, we get 5 radar towers, which was like 2.8 million pieces of raw data that you go through line by line by line. And under the radar, if something was flying under the radar here, it's below 3,000 to 2,800 feet, so below that. So at times, we would get an unknown popping up because it had gone under the radar and then come back up above the 3,000 feet. But you can sort of tell that it is the same object because, it continued on the same path. So, but, you can't be absolutely sure. So, actually, this thing was doing some really crazy stuff. It was going as fast as 2,100 miles per hour, then slowed down to like 520, and then slowed down to like 49 miles per hour. It should have fallen out of the sky, but it didn't.
And where did it ultimately end up going?
Huh?
I said, where did it ultimately end up going?
Well, we asked for radar data from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. for the night of January the 8th, because the main sighting time we thought was about 6:30. So we really, in hindsight, if we had known, we would have, gone till midnight or something probably. But at 8 o'clock, when the radar data ran out, this unknown was flying into President Bush's Crawford Ranch. It was 10 miles from Crawford Ranch, flying without a transponder, unimpeded. And obviously that is a no-fly zone, and the no-fly zone gets tighter when he's there. And but he was not there that night. But still, that thing, whatever it was, should not have been able to fly without a transponder. That's what happened on 911. The pilots turned off the transponders on those jets.
Right.
And
what has been the response to that? What has been the official response to doing nothing about that?
Well, it's just been incredible because we sent letters to Homeland Security, to about every senator or congressman you can think of, and nobody's even answered them. I think one man from NORAD did answer, a general, and just said he knew nothing of the incident that we were referring to. And so we wrote him back and, offered to send him the radar report and all of that. And no response. It's like nobody cares. And what I think is, here we spent all this money on Homeland Security and creating this office, and then they didn't even respond to a FOIA, if I remember correctly. We sent a Freedom of Information Act there, too, and it wasn't responded to either. So, and here's the other thing. When it did match up with 8 of the witnesses in time and direction, and all of these people were located in different places, okay, I thought, oh, my gosh, this is going to be a huge story. I really did. And I sent out press releases to all of the major networks that had already been here previously. Like Good Morning America came here, different, mainstream media. And I probably sent out, I think it was 18 press releases, not one response. And I thought, oh, my gosh, they're missing this. This is the big story, because this is about as hard of evidence as you're going to get. But since I've been in the newsroom for a while, I think probably what happened is an editor or a producer sees Stephenville, and the story broke 6 months before that. And they, oh, yeah, we've done that Stephenville thing. Let's find something else, We need something new. And they didn't pick it up at all, and I was really disappointed.
Wow. Well, so
only Larry King Live picked it up, so yay for Larry King.
I'm sorry? Oh, Larry
only
King
Larry
Live,
King picked it up, so yay for Larry King.
Yeah, but then he still has his skeptics on to have a false debate. I'm getting a little sick of that routine.
Well, and that's journalism. You have to present both sides. I guess it doesn't matter who you choose to present both sides, but in fairness, that's what they're doing is, they're having, the UFO people give their side, and then the debunker comes on and says, oh, no, this couldn't have happened, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So,
but it's never someone who's like an expert in radar, or, it's not like, it's just someone who's like a professional debunker, like that out of work, Mr. Wizard guy or whatever his name is.
The last time I was on Larry King, it was Bill Nye the Science Guy. Remember him?
Right, Bill Nye the Science Guy. That's it. Yeah, that's right.
That was him. And I don't even really know what his last name is. I've forgotten now. But I always knew him as Bill Nye the Science Guy because I used to be a fifth grade teacher, and those shows were great to use for teaching. And I can't remember. And there was another one before that. It was Seth Shostak from SETI.
Right.
SETI.
Right. And then the SETI people send their. See, we've found this out. The SETI people go on that show so that they can specifically distance themselves from the UFO topic, so that they can continue to receive funding and look legitimate. I mean, that's really all they care about.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, what would happen if someone from SETI came forward and said, yes, extraterrestrials are here, we are being visited? Well, their job would be over.
Right. This is true.
So
now you're doing... Yeah, I just want to say you're doing the Joiner report. How are you liking it? How are you differentiating yourself from other voices out there? Are you bringing your your reporter voice to it, your sort of reporter objectivity to it? Give us some details on the show.
Let me tell you, the Joiner report was born in the chat room of the X conference when it was being streamed live. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the X conference was being streamed?
Yes.
So I was in the chat room with some people, and one was D. Andrew from Eye to the Sky. And they were talking about the different radio shows, and I, wrote something and said, well, we should all have our own radio show. And they said, well, you should. And that's sort of how it came up. And I don't know. I think my perspective on doing the show is just doing it from the perspective of someone that's new, not necessarily a reporter. But, I have a lot to learn. There is a lot of history that goes with this that you don't find in any school textbooks. So I just kind of look at it like, okay, if you're interested and you're have some questions because you're new like me, well, come and listen, because I'm asking the questions that I want to know that haven't been clear to me, and so it might clear up something for someone else. But so far, they say I'm averaging about 50,000 listeners, and I guess we've done 4 shows. My first guest was Miles O'Brien, formerly of CNN, and the reason I asked him to come on was because you remember the week, I believe it was Thanksgiving week in November, every morning he did a little series on UFOs and the whole topic, and then like 9 days later they fired him. Mm-hmm. And so people were emailing me and calling me going, oh my God, the same thing has happened to Miles O'Brien that happened to you. And I was going, what? I didn't even know about it. And so I started getting in touch with him, and he didn't feel that was the reason that he got fired, but he said in retrospect it probably didn't help him any, but he was asked to do that show. So anyway, he was my first guest, and I was real proud of that, and he's a really nice man. And if you haven't heard it, you can still download it on the UFO Paranormal Network. But and see, there's another friend I've made from something happening, and I keep in touch with him, and he's interested in doing a documentary on Stephenville. Mm-hmm. He's real impressed with the radar report, and that's the main reason that he's interested in doing a documentary. But if you don't know, he's on Facebook, and he posts about every shuttle launch, everything going on, like minute to minute, who's getting in, what they're doing. It's just pretty cool. So you might want to sign up for it to be a Facebook friend so you can get all those updates. So it's just
you had another guest that night, did you not? Did you not have another guest that night, Richard Dolan?
Yeah, Richard Dolan was on that night too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what was your take on him?
Well, I first met Richard also at the X-Con whenever I met you, Jeremy, and I was very impressed with his knowledge, and extremely nice, Karen, and it really he seemed to be one of those that had really done some homework and some research. Mm-hmm. And I was meeting so many people so fast there that I really couldn't keep up with everybody. It was just incredible. But I've seen him, since at the Ozark conference this past April. He and his wife were there, but I barely got to see him. Everybody was real busy, so.
Mm-hmm. So did anything come up on your show that surprised you, or was it all stuff that you sort of expected and knew to hear from him?
Yeah, I don't think I've been really surprised over anything. I questioned him about his use of witnesses that don't go on the record with their name. I don't know, and I say this, and, I did have one witness myself, Officer X, that I used that I didn't put his name out. So maybe I guess that we all do that to some extent. I'd like to see, in a way, I think if it's somebody that's not going to use their name, then don't tell the story, because it just, I don't know, it's sort of exasperating to me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where I stand on that, other than you then, have to sort of trust the credibility of the person telling it to you.
Yeah, it's like you have to trust, okay, Richard Dolan, is he credible? Well, yeah, I think so. But darn it, who are you talking to?
Right.
And then I'm always a little skeptical myself. If somebody doesn't want me to use their name, then I am afraid that person might be trying to lead me down a road that I would not would like to be on. So I'm real hesitant about that. Even when I'm writing just regular newspaper stories, hardly ever do I write a story where, I don't name somebody. Mm-hmm. But, I have done it myself with Officer X and the sighting on January the 8th. He and two other law enforcement officers actually saw a craft and not just lights. So to me, that was a pretty big story. And, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you, by coming forward and going on Larry King a couple times, have you, and sticking with this stuff, had any influence on other mainstream reporters? Has anyone ever contacted you and said anything to you about any of this, positive or negative?
A mainstream reporter? Early on, I remember this lady, but this was kind of a local thing. From Dallas, she was on Channel 11, and she was sitting across my desk at the newspaper, and she goes, "How in the world did you have the guts to do this story?" And I said, "Well, if you had talked to Steve Allen, you might have done it too." She said, "No, never." Well, she kind of dropped it at that. The producers with, Larry King Live were real interested, in talking to the witness, what they see. Several, TV news type personalities were here, and I'm still in touch with most of them. And they don't ridicule me or anything for doing the story at all. Jim Douglas with Channel 8 here had told me, well, this was right when it hit, I guess, after the Associated Press did their story. He came down and talked to me. He said, "I don't really think you understand what you've done. I've been in this business, I don't know what he said, 28 years or something. I've never had a story go international, and your story has gone international in 48 hours or whatever it was. I can't remember." And I guess I really didn't have a good grasp of it because things were happening so fast that you just turned around and somebody else was there asking you a question, and you just kind of methodically went through it. And I didn't think that much of it. But, there were some reporters that asked me questions. But, as far as people like 2020 or Good Morning America, no, not those types.
Jeff?
Hi, how are you? Angela, I'm curious, anytime a big sighting happens to come up, usually what will happen in the general vicinity of that sighting is that you'll get a lot of false reports over days, weeks, months afterwards.
Sure.
Have you gotten a lot of that with Stephenville? Has there been a lot of...
Well, I'll tell you what happened in the fall of last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in October, the F-16 started dropping flares, and I don't mean just a few. I mean like 3 nights in a row, maybe stop a night, drop flares again. If you've never seen flares, they're fairly spectacular. Mm-hmm. The only reason that I knew what they were is because I had been doing some research, and I had been reading about Phoenix Lights and talking with Dr. Kikai. And so I had looked at some video of them. And one night in October, my husband came in from outside. Hey, get out here. You got to look at this. And so I went out there. Oh, yeah, it's flares. Okay, so sightings started coming in. And I was like, okay, people are seeing the flares. But honest people make honest mistakes. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't seen the flares, and you were in this area, you might think, well, that's a UFO. So it became a matter of talking to the witnesses and getting a description, and then you could determine, okay, was what they were seeing flares or was it something else? So on November the 18th, I talked to some witnesses, and there were flares on that night. We sent FOIAs, and we have dates of when the flares were dropped. But I have 3 people, 2 in the same location, 1 in a different location that actually saw another craft. Excuse me. And this one man, his name is Michael Korn. He was, I believe, 27 years old and had just come home from Iraq. And very familiar with what's supposed to be in the sky and what isn't. And, you know, he said, I don't think what I saw was ours. He said, I don't think there's any way. His girlfriend described it. It was so lit up, she said it reminded her of a carousel laying on its side. So I wrote that story. Some of my stories like that have printed in the Abilene Reporter News. So you do have people that see these flares, and, you know, it's a little confusing. And we have had, you know, it's come across a police scanner, people pulling off to the side of the road, pulling over, trying to watch them and see what was going on.
Right.
And they've had to go out there and tell them, you know, you're causing a traffic hazard, you got to go on. And it's very strange, though, that we've never seen flares here, and then all of a sudden we start seeing them all the time.
Right, like the distraction tactic that most people more or less associate with the Phoenix Lights thing.
Right.
You know,
I mean,
that same kind of
Officer
look
X
over here,
called
you know.
me. Yeah, Officer X called me and said, Angela, get outside. Have you seen this? What is going on? Mm-hmm. And he said, you know, I was born here, and I have never seen flares dropped here. There's something more to this.
Right.
And I really sort of agreed, because it was just so strange. Why do they start dropping them now?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, especially when people are looking up here more, and it can become a traffic hazard. And the other thing is, I did try to call Major Carl Lewis again, but he wouldn't return my call, because we were also in a very dry period, a drought, mm-hmm. and we had burn bans on. And I thought, what if I talked to a retired Air Force person, a pilot, and he said some of those flares they call fizzlers. And he said that means something about it doesn't work properly, and it might not ignite until it's in the top of a tree or on the ground. Mm-hmm. Well, in that case, you know, that would be very bad here. 2 years ago, we had horrible fires here where people were cutting the fences to try to save their cattle, their livestock, and some homes were burned. And, you know, I thought, how do they get away with dropping these in a burn ban? But he wouldn't call me back, so I never got to talk to him.
Has there been, you know, one of the things we kind of focus on this show is the the real weird aspect of this stuff that usually most people don't want to talk about. During the main Stephenville sighting and even some of the little, peripheral sightings that have happened since then, has there been any murmurings underneath the breath of people reporting things to you that are just beyond bizarre? In other words, more or less sort of, I don't know what you might deem paranormal activity as opposed to strictly the UFO thing, kind of a higher aspect ratio of, I don't know, hearing about figures moving around someone's house or that kind of very strange stuff. Have you had any of that pop up here and there at all?
No, I haven't really. I've not even had anybody come up to me and say they were abducted at that time or anything like that. And someone had told me that I probably would start getting reports like that about July, but I really never did. The only really strange thing that I know of is there is a neighbor of Ricky Sorrell's. And Ricky is the one, if you remember, that he saw the thing in the daytime right over his head, like 300 feet. He could see the cone-shaped indentions and all that. Mm-hmm. Well, it was quite a period of time, and I really can't even tell you what the date was now. But Ricky brought me a Polaroid picture. He said, "Look at this." Okay. And I don't know if you guys are familiar, but we have these big round hay bales here. Mm-hmm. They're probably 1,500 pounds or something.
Yeah, it looks like jelly rolls. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of his neighbors had his hay baled, and these things stand up on their side, I guess you would call it. Well, all of these hay bales had been knocked over flat, and he had 3 dead cows. And it was an older gentleman, and he didn't tell Ricky about it for a couple of days, I guess. And he had already chained onto the cows and drug them to his pit with a tractor, so he didn't get a chance to look at them or anything. Mm-hmm. But I always thought that was sort of strange because it was like 70 of those things. And, it probably take, 8 or 10 pretty hunky high school football players to turn one over.
Yeah.
I can't imagine turning 70 over. I mean, would you want to do that much work for a host? I don't know.
Well, I wouldn't. I'm curious, you've probably looked into this more than anyone. And, judging by the fact that you haven't got those visitation reports and you haven't gotten little beings on the ground reports and stuff like that, are you kind of more inclined to think that this was something that we have?
Well, early on, I really did think it was something military. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, I bet they're just testing something or whatever. But as Larry King asked me on that July show, well, Angela, what do you think it was? So, well, I don't know, but if it is military, why do they keep bringing it back here where people are aware? I mean, it's kind of the horse is out of the barn now, so why don't you move it? Mm-hmm. So that doesn't make sense to me, that if it is military and something that got this much publicity, it seems to me you would take it someplace else.
Well, what's it been like lately in Stephenville? Has there been anything fairly recent, within the past couple of months?
2 weeks ago on a Thursday night, I don't know, you guys might be familiar with Jack Harris, who has the Captain Jack radio show, paranormal radio show.
No, I'm sorry, him? No, I don't.
Okay. Well, he is in Brownwood, which is about 60 miles south of us, and I had done a couple of shows with him, and he called, and they had video cameras set up outside the studio. Well, some listener, called them and said, "Hey, what is that light that's not moving on the video cam?" And when the show was over at 11 o'clock, they went out, and here's this huge triangle thing over their studio. So he and his producer jump in the car, start trying to follow it, trying to get good pictures. And they had a still camera and had a video camera. And none of the pictures turned out. And I said, Jack, now you know why people are, how difficult it is to get a good picture. And, and that's one of the things that people really criticize for. Well, if there is something in the air, why can't you get a picture of it? Well, it's not that easy. We don't all walk around with Fox News type cameras on our shoulders. And that's really, it takes something good like that to get something.
Yeah.
And a cell phone is not going to do it, and most digital cameras aren't going to do it. So anyway, the next day, they went out and put flyers out asking for people to call either them or to email me on my website. But I haven't gotten any reports of anybody else seeing anything at that time. And the last I heard from him, he hadn't gotten anything either, but it's probably been about a week since I talked to him. But he was really thinking it was large enough that surely other people had to have seen it. And he said there were other people on the road. So, that's the last thing I know of.
That's curious. Well, to switch gears a little bit, this is a question that Jeremy and I talked about asking you when we were on the phone with each other the other night. And,
yes.
And you can feel free to say no comment because you're a reporter after all. Since you've been in this and since you've probably met so many people in such a short amount of time, who more or less strikes you as a really not credible person or someone that's not doing ufology any favors at all by speaking out about this? I mean, I think when you mentioned Michael Sala writing the newspaper and all that, I'm sure, I almost look at the exopolitical crowd sometimes in the way of, I feel like in some small way they mean well, but in most ways they usually are putting their mouths where it's either not needed or not wanted.
Well, if you listen to my interview with Steve Bassett, I really questioned him pretty hard about Alfred Weber's article that had come out. I think it had just come out that same week I interviewed him, or maybe it was a week before, I don't know. But it was the one that had the headline that says 1 billion people abducted, something.
Right.
Do you remember that one?
Sure.
And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, how do you get your facts? I mean, how do you get those facts like that? I don't know. But to me, those type of sensational headlines, and I think they are sensational, I don't think that does the ufology community any favors. I would really like to see Obama release the 60-year-old files and documents and things that they have so that we might get another witness like Milton Torres. But, I think articles like that just make the thing more difficult to get it done.
Right.
I have never met Alfred or Michael Sala. I've never met them. I don't know them personally, and I'm sure that they have good intentions. But I sometimes I think things are too sensationalized.
Well,
and I know you're doing that so you can get somebody to click on it and read the headline is what's going to draw in the reader, right?
Sure.
Because if you're looking at the newspaper, the headline is. That's how you determine if you're going to go ahead and read the article, right?
Right, sure.
So that's what I think that's what their goal is to get eyes on the article, but I'm just not sure that's the best way to do it.
Well, I think Stephen Bassett has said he doesn't really care what kind of attention that he gets, as long as he's got eyes on. That's really all that seems to matter.
That's right. I think that is how he feels.
Which is a kind of a damn the torpedoes of credibility type stance to have when you're trying to deal with something as volatile as this is, and as fickle as the American public can be with just about anything, especially a fringe topic like this where you're talking about credibility meaning everything.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't see this guy doing anybody any favors, except maybe his own agenda of some sort that he has. Who else? I mean, who else would you think of right off the top of your head that you've interacted with that you just don't see anything to, or you walk away from saying kind of that roll your eyes and phew, couldn't get out of that conversation fast enough. I mean,
besides this one.
But yeah, besides this one, what other ones?
Well, really, I can't say there's been anybody like that because the exopolitics crowd, even Steve said, that Alfred is on the fringes, although, I guess they work together and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But
he gave him an award. Mm-hmm. Didn't he give him like a Lifetime Achievement Award? I mean, come on.
I think so, yeah.
Was that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
See,
Alfred Weber coined the term exopolitics. I don't understand how he's fringe. He coined the term exopolitics.
Well, that's what he said on the show. I'm pretty sure he said it was a fringe thing.
Hysterical.
Well, I guess Steve is of the opinion maybe that any publicity is better than no publicity.
Right.
He seems good at generating that publicity, doesn't he?
Well, I also don't think we can use Stephen Bassett's awards as any kind of benchmark, due to the fact that Stephen Bassett a couple of X-conferences ago stood up in front of everyone and said that the phenomena is without question definitely confirmed extraterrestrial. I mean, how the hell do you know that? Give me a break. So is Stephen Bassett the benchmark for goddamn ufology? No.
Well, see, and that was one thing that I was sort of disappointed in because when he was at that press conference, he made it sound, even though he said it wasn't a threat, you don't threaten the government, but he really did make it sound as if this third wave that was going to be, June the 1st, was going to be a release of information that was going to make the government look like they had egg on their face. And then it turned out, that it is... they're going to, have people bombard the National Press Corps with, why aren't you asking the president these type questions, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So,
right.
And he even said, well, I might have blown that out of proportion or something like that. Remember that on that show, but, that's just how he works, I guess.
Yeah.
And because I found that a little puzzling, but I do think that every time somebody's out there and they say, oh, this is the year for disclosure, this is the year it's going to happen, and, whether it's Steve Bassett or whoever it is, and that year it doesn't happen, then the next year you're going to have trouble getting people to listen to you, and the next year you're going to have even more trouble, and pretty soon the press is going to just start ignoring you.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, he's sort of become ufology's wrecking ball. Just by those kind of things alone, you're going to have egg on your face, Mr. Government, if you don't release this and that and the other, and the guy's ankle deep in egg. So I don't, I don't see where his ultimatum really played out at all.
Well, where it worked for him was he had CNN there, covering the press conference, So that's where it works for him. But how long can he get away with that? I don't know. I mean, every year you say this is the year for disclosure, and this is going to happen, and you're losing ground every year that it doesn't happen. Then
absolutely.
And so I know that Steve has a good heart, that he is actually, I know he works tirelessly on this. Mm-hmm. I get the press releases just like y'all do, that he may send them out 3:00 in the morning or something. Mm-hmm. So he's working hard, and he is probably generating more publicity for the subject than anyone else. Now, do I feel like any publicity is better than no publicity? Personally, no, I don't.
Right.
I don't want to be in the news because I've lost my credibility.
Right. Well, you do have to wonder why CNN covers that conference. I really, the past couple of years have started to wonder just exactly why do they show up at these things. And I don't know if it's some kind of promise of some unbelievable footage, or is it because that Edgar Mitchell is there? I mean, is that...
I think this is the first time they covered the press conference, isn't it?
Well, I think I think the year before, I think that they were on. It was some kind of media coverage, big media coverage of that.
I spoke at the press conference, and I don't remember CNN being there.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, you may be right.
At the National Press Club.
Yeah.
Now, they might have been in the hotel at some stuff. I don't know. There were so many people there, I can't remember. But I'm pretty sure they were not at the National Press Club.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the first year for that. And definitely the draw was Edgar Mitchell, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is why CNN covered it. I mean, I have no doubt. And also, the reason they did is because, he had made headlines, national headlines, wasn't it last July?
Yeah, Kerrang! Radio.
He was, and everybody just went nuts, even though he'd been saying the same thing. He even said, I've been saying this for 10 years. I don't know why it took off like this.
Exactly.
Remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he had those headlines, and so I'm sure CNN followed that. And then when they heard he was going to be at the press conference, that they decided they would cover it. And I'm sure it's because of Edgar Mitchell. I don't have any doubt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's it's kind of unfortunate that these things, they get a lot of attention, but I don't think that they seem to really say or do very much. I mean, even when you're talking about putting somebody as elite as an astronaut on the table for everyone to see that, and it makes a splash in the news for, I mean, that day I think it was a matter of hours, and that was it. It was done.
Well, see, and that was also the first time, I believe, now I might be wrong, but I think that was the first time that Edgar Mitchell ever called on Obama for disclosure, or ever called on government for disclosure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He's talked about it, and says this needs to be done, but here he is at the National Press Club, asking, that these files and everything be disclosed. And I think that was the first time he had done that.
Let me ask you, do you think that disclosure needs to happen? I don't understand what the pressure is to disclose. Disclose what? What is it that we're all expecting to be disclosed?
Well, what I want to see is those documents that are classified. I want to see them declassified so that, we might get more witnesses like Milton Torres, that didn't talk until the UK released their files. So, okay, and so I have to ask myself, are these 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old files, would they have any bearing now on national security? Well, surely not, but, I could be wrong. But why not release them? Why hold those documents back? Now, do I expect the president to suddenly come on television, and tell us all that there is an ET presence living among us and they've been here for many years? And no, I don't think that's going to happen. Right. But I do, for disclosure for me, is seeing those files released, and I don't see any reason they shouldn't.
Well, if that were the case, if the president could come on and say that, would you want him to?
If it's the truth, I would. Yeah.
Even if that changed everything.
If the president knows that there is an ET presence here, then I think we have a right to know that. I don't.
You have a right to know it, but I mean, what would be the options? I mean, you've got like two options for that, really. There's an ET presence here, and we know about it, and they're now going to come down and shake hands with us, and that changes society. And we know that from our own past experiences that the way it changes society is that it destroys it, and that we sort of become irrelevant in the face of the more advanced society. Or they say, yeah, there are these aliens here or something, and we don't know what they are. We don't know if we can fight them or should or what. So there you go. I mean, either scenario isn't, I think, like, I don't know. For me personally, I feel like there is, of course, a part of me that's like, yes, that we're mature enough to handle it. But then I think the reality is that we're not. That we'll either build up an arms race against this enemy, or this thing that we see as an enemy, or if it were some sort of like open handshake deal, we would just be consumed by it.
Well, if it were to happen, certainly it would change the world. And I think that it would change in the way that Ronald Reagan, spoke of. If we were to be up against an alien presence, we would, unite as one world, and we wouldn't have these countries that are fighting against each other. So, definitely, I think it would change, and in some cases, it wouldn't be good. I mean, we've already seen our economy collapse, and it didn't take aliens to do that. So,
but why is it a good thing? Like that worries me. If the best response that we can have to think that we're mature enough to handle aliens is that the entire world would stop fighting each other long enough to fight something else. That to me isn't maturity. Yeah, well, one world united against. It's never just one world united. It's always, well, gee, I wonder if there were an alien threat, if we would unite against it. It's like, well why can't we just unite?
I think that's what would happen if we did not have definite information to tell us otherwise, that we weren't in any danger or something. If it was already proven that the ET presence was benevolent and not out to get us, then probably that, then it would probably be everybody, or how do we get them on our side? How do we get that technology for ourselves? And,
right.
You still have that division.
Angela, let me ask you this. And this is not a trick question at all. What would you say that over the past 60-plus years that the government has withheld information regarding UFOs?
Well, I think we can definitely say that they've withheld information, or we wouldn't have classified documents that we can't look at.
Okay, would you say that they have aggressively defended a lie that they've put forth as far as explaining things away?
Aggressively defended a lie.
Yes. In other words, saying there is nothing to UFOs. What UFOs we have investigated, only a very small portion of them are unexplainable, and it's probably because some sort of misperception, or just in the case of let's look at Phoenix. It was flares,
right.
And I
don't know, but in some ways I think so, because if that weren't the case, you still wouldn't have all those files locked up.
Right. So knowing all that, knowing that, the stance is, and this is not really, honest to God, this is not my stance. Having a stance of saying that they are withholding information, and they've essentially told falsehoods about that information, whether giving misinformation out or muddying the waters or threatening people or whatever, this would be the same government that would be coming on saying, hey, guess what? We've got visitors, and we don't know who they are or what they want, and in a lot of ways they're better than we are, and oh yeah, they can make us do things we don't want to do. So in that kind of scenario, that they would come out and disclose things, would you believe them after 60-plus years?
If they came out and disclosed and said they're here? Yeah, I think I would believe them. Would you?
No.
You wouldn't?
No, because after this long, after this many years of I mean, first of all, I have to say, I don't think that they know.
Well, they would have to, if they did come out and say that, then I would think they would present, some sort of knowledge to go along with that to show people this is how we know it's here,
Well, I think by the same token that if you look back over how many years that let's go back to the old mainstay of Roswell, which is kind of a dirty word around Paratopia, but there's the proponents of that case say it's been covered up, it's been lied about, it's been covered in so much silt and debris that we'll never really understand.
Even Victor Mitchell says that.
Right, it's so buried that we'll never get to it, and even to this day, there is probably some sort of documentation somewhere that states exactly what happened at Roswell. Tomorrow, if they came out and said, hey, guess what? Roswell was a craft. We don't know where it came from. These beings aren't here, but there was a craft. It was not human. And that's all we know. I wouldn't believe it for an iota. Because we're talking about the same entity that has allegedly lied and covered up and thrown disinformation, allegedly threatened people.
But if you have that outlook, then you can't believe anything they ever say. And so why even ask the questions? Why even listen to the president on television or senators or congressmen? Because if you have that outlook, if you believe they're lying when they're not, and you believe they're lying when they're lying, then you'll never get anywhere.
Well, I mean, when it comes to, at least with this subject, this is a question I always have to ask people when they talk about disclosure. It's like, I would be gravely concerned about who's going to disclose what. I mean, my personal stance on it is that they don't really know a whole lot more than we do, and they probably have better data, but aside from that, I don't think they know anything. And I think that's part of the reason for the perceived cover-up of this whole thing is that,
well, now you may be right, is they really don't have that much information. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe they're like us, they have more questions than they have answers. But right. I sure would like to be the one that sat down and went through those boxes of files and read what was in there.
Oh,
That's what I want to do.
Yeah, it'd be interesting for sure. Yeah, but
and why not release them? If you're not hiding anything, well, right. What is the harm? Right. On these old documents. Okay. Maybe something that's 20 years old is too new, maybe even 30 years old. It could still have some, repercussion for releasing it in some way that would damage
there's
our
always
country.
There's always some kind of lineage going back to some other story that could be connected and construed. So that's
but,
always a
give
problem.
us the 50s and 60s at least,
Right. Well, I mean, that, I don't know. I mean, like I say, my whole thing with this is how much would you believe of what was told to you, depending on what was told to you, by, whomever. And I mean, I don't know. I almost think sometimes that there's some kind of truth to the whole, shadow government or, some kind of other controlling body out there that is withholding this stuff, and that really has little to do with the people in real power. So, I mean, again, when you talk about all of the stuff that's been thrown on top of ufology for 60-plus years, I just don't know that I'd be that willing to accept an answer that was given to me by the very people who were covering it up for so long, if that makes any sense. It's kind of like the boy crying wolf, but, and
so you think that the only way you would believe it is if an ET walked up to you and said, "I'm here," and you would believe that, but you wouldn't believe the government.
Well, I mean, I kind of take a McKenna stance on that when I say, I don't believe anything really past my own direct experience with a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and for me, that's, for me, that scenario you just flipped out there, that's happened to me. So I don't, I don't have any doubt as to that there's something there, but I'm not even willing to go as far as to say it's extraterrestrial or it's, I don't know what the hell it is.
It might be something spiritual or...
Oh, it could be. I mean, that it could be any damn thing. I don't know.
Well, I've been watching lately these elderly ladies, the Holt sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching that video, and I've replayed it, and their father was a minister, and then his cousin was Secretary of State. What was his name? I brought this up. Let's see. Cordell Hull.
Okay.
And, took him in the sub-basement of the Capitol and showed him these containers, I guess for lack of a better word, a big jar, with these beings in them. Uh-huh. And I keep thinking about how these sisters would say their father called them creatures.
Uh-huh.
He didn't call them ETs. He didn't call them aliens, but he called them creatures. That's probably, just a word of that time, for the Roosevelt administration or something.
Okay.
But I look at those two elderly ladies and I think, why in the world would they have any reason to, come out and just tell this big lie about their father, who was a minister, and from all that I've read was supposed to be very honest and
right.
truthful, well-liked man, an intelligent man.
Right.
And so when I look at some of those stories like that, and I don't know, these old ladies just really kind of, I don't know, they just did something to me. I was like, I think they're telling the truth.
Well, I think you might be right. They maybe are telling the truth. The big ultimate question there is, what was their father shown? What were they that he was shown? I mean, if we're taking for fact that he was taken somewhere and shown some sort of bodies in tubes, in some sort of formaldehyde or whatever, what exactly was that? That doesn't necessarily mean to me that was some sort of non-human being. I think that whatever kind of comes out of this from a...
Well, the description that he gave them, they were about 4 feet tall. I mean, with a head that seemed larger than normal. Mm-hmm. And he also told them there was a wrecked craft there in the sub-basement of the Capitol building. Mm-hmm. And it was some sort of craft that flew without wings. It didn't have wings. So, I don't know. It's so hard to figure out because then you also come up with, I'll find a story. I think it was, I can't remember his name. Philip, I don't know, but he told this story, I watched it on YouTube. He was a researcher, and he worked at Grooms Lake, and he went down in an elevator at one of their sites, and there was a shootout, with aliens and all.
Right. Oh,
and he
yeah.
holds up his hand. Remember that?
Sure.
He holds up his hand, and he's got like 3 fingers gone.
Right.
What is his name? Snyder?
Phil Schneider.
Phil Snyder.
Phil Schneider, yeah.
And so I was really intrigued by that. And then, and then I'm coming along and I'm talking to somebody about it. Well, that story's already been debunked because at the time he said that he was there, and when he would have had to gotten his degree, well, then he would have had to have been 12 when he graduated and all this stuff. And I thought, oh, God, it's so hard to get through all that crap,
Yeah. Believe, government doesn't need to interfere in anything with this information because ufology does it all by itself.
I know. That is the truth.
Yeah.
And because I just was really intrigued with that. I was watching all of them, and thank God somebody told me, we already know about that, and the numbers didn't add up. I was like, oh, God. Well, how do you know what you're supposed to believe and what you don't?
Right.
I thought it was a really good story, and it was a really good story, but that's all it was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's plenty of interesting stories, but unfortunately there's little to back any of them up, including mine. It is hard, and I guess, being, relatively new into this, you're finding a lot of stuff that, seems to be really exciting stuff, and then further down the line you find out, it's nonsense or it's a hoax of some sort.
Exactly.
One way or another.
Early on I was just reading everything that I could find on the internet, and then I soon found, okay, this is not the way to go about this, because what I need to do is I need to talk to people that already know the stories, and they can say, yes, this one is a good one, this one's not, and that way I wouldn't be wasting so much of my time, because there was so much stuff on there that the people, really seemed like they had some validity.
How do you find the majority of people that you interact with that aren't researchers, that are just people that you speak to at conferences or what have you, just general public? Do you feel more often than not, really, that they seem to have a deep-seated need to believe in general in this stuff, or do you think that do you think people are becoming a little bit more critical of what they see and hear out of this stuff?
Well, I don't think, in my experience at the conferences, the people that come to the conferences that pay money to come and hear speakers and interact with speakers or just friends, meet other people, they are at the conference because they already believe.
Right.
Most of them know more than I do. They're probably all of them did, because they have some sort of history behind them. They either had a sighting at some time in their lives, or they had a family member that had a sighting or something. There's something that drew them there in the first place. But most of those people at the conferences do believe. They already are pretty sure that there's somebody visiting. Usually what happens to me is as soon as I stop speaking, people line up to talk to me. And usually it's not to ask me a question, but it's to share with me whatever their experience was.
Right.
Whether they want to tell me what they saw, or they want to tell me, when they were abducted or whatever. It's usually nothing to do with Stephenville as to why they line up there.
Huh. Jer?
Well, Angela. That's interesting. I mean, that's almost speakers at a conference as therapists or something,
Uh-huh.
Well, have you ever noticed on Coast to Coast, when they use that call-in number, and I remember one time I was on there with George Knapp, and he even went on to say, okay, the call-in number is for questions for myself or Angelia Joiner or Alejandro Rojas or whoever was on with me. And this is not the time to share your experience. And then I'll be danged. The first person that called said, I want to tell you about in 1964 I saw blah, blah, blah. Well, that is quite common. And that's something that I noticed at the, I got to think. When we were having the meetings in Dublin for the witnesses, in January, MUFON had these meetings, right? And we were swamped with people. There was like 500 people there. We couldn't believe it. And so they started turning around and walking out when the TV cameras went. We're going to have to do this again. We had another one. A lot of the same people came back the second time. And the reason they did was so they wanted to talk about it. They were looking for someone else that had seen something so they could converse about it without, fear of ridicule or whatever.
Sure.
But anybody had an experience, they're dying to tell you about it. The same thing happened to me on Dr. Laurie Nadell's show. She had a call-in, supposed to ask questions, but, he told us his experience, what had happened to him. So, there is a great deal of interest, but and people are more than willing to, if they can find that comfort zone, that where they feel that they can talk about it, safely, then they want to talk about it.
Yeah, there's a great deal of interest in them telling you their own story. I mean, does it get more narcissistic than that?
Well, you remember you told me your story at the ex-con when I first met you?
Yeah, well, Jeremy Vaeni, come on.
Well, sure, yeah, but that was just because I couldn't believe you hadn't heard of me.
I'm sure he was charming.
If I recall, because I just think that this is true of me in general, and even if I don't remember it this way, I must have only told you that because you had asked. Like, I don't think I would have just come up to you and offered my story and been like, "I'm an alien abductee, Angela. How are you?"
We were out on the patio and just talking about it in general, and I probably did ask you a question because that's sort of the reporter in me, is I do question a lot. So that is probably why, but that's funny. But it was a good story, Jeremy.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, well, I've had years to practice it. So anyway, was that out loud?
Oh.
I feel like we should probably wrap this up because we've been on a lot longer than the allotted hour, and now we're keeping you past your bedtime.
Yes.
And you probably want to get back to your husband.
I stay up late. I'm a night owl. So.
Well, thanks, Angela, for coming on and talking with us tonight. I really appreciate that.
Well, sure. I have really enjoyed it, and just any time.
Well, tell all your friends.
I will.
Tell all your what?
I sent
tell all your friends, Angela.
Everybody. Your little clip with me telling you that you weren't going to make it on Saturday Night Live.
Oh, come on. You know that's not true. Now stop.
I sent it to everybody I knew. And they all got a big hee-haw out of it. So.
Hey, tell us how people can listen to your show or your website or any of that fun stuff.
Okay, my website is www.Angelia Joiner, JOINER.com. And you can listen to me on the Joiner Report on Friday nights at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
We're calling Jeremy Vaeni.
Hello.
Jeremy Vaeni, Paratopia Live. How did you feel the show went, Jeremy?
Live and nude.
Yes.
I thought that you saved it. I think my questions were pretty erratic and all over the place and some of them sticky. I mean, honest to God, and so there's that. But no, I like Angelia Joiner.
Yeah, me too.
I think she is the sexiest woman in ufology currently. If for no other reason than the glasses and the beehive hairdo thing, it's like the porn librarian. I'm a sucker for that.
All right, moving on.
Yes, okay, go ahead. I don't know if that's appropriate or not. She's a married woman. And I respect that. Frankly, I love her husband too, but not for the same reason.
And it looks pretty much like, let's see, how do they put it in Texas? He'd stomp a mud hole in your back.
Oh, yeah. No, let's make no bones about this. I'm not really hitting on the woman. He would kill me. He would destroy me.
So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice to chat with somebody who's got a perspective of being relatively new to all of this and not really knowing all of the backstory and the preconceived notions about people in it, which is kind of an interesting perspective to get here and there. I just wanted to, and dare I use this word, I want to qualify my earlier statement about the disclosure type of thing. I don't mean to say that you shouldn't believe anything the government says because they're out there. I don't take the Dale Gribble approach to government. What I was kind of getting at in that little scenario was that you're talking about whatever is withholding UFO data, if there is any to be withheld. I have a problem when people cry for disclosure and they're asking for that disclosure from the very entity that they allege has lied about it and aggressively defended that lie for 60 some odd years. That's where I have the problem with that, is how do you say, okay, well, now I believe you because you're telling me what I want to hear. And this has kind of been like a mainstay through, for the past 5 years or 6 years for me. It's like, and I mentioned this to my my research partner one time. He's like, well, what if it's something really bad? And he ultimately said, well, it would be bad because it would be, the panic is a very real part of disclosure. Whether or not we say we're ready, we don't know what that means because we don't know what we're ready for. But at the same time, if they're more advanced than us and they're hanging around, then the ultimate process after that is acculturation, which means we get absorbed into their culture or we fail as a culture ourselves. We have to adapt to whatever they are. So I think that that's ultimately where it becomes the problem for me. But
I like how we're such a backwards bunch of apes running around here that we honestly think that Ronald Reagan's speech was like an enlightened principle of, gee, if the world could just have something else to argue and fight over, we'd stop fighting and arguing over each other. And that's essentially what the speech is. If we had something else to kill, we could aim all of our guns at it together and come together as a world and kill it.
Yeah, it is absurd.
Really?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, of course, because, don't get me wrong. If the saucers appeared in mass tomorrow, I'd be grabbing 2 of my Arisaka rifles and standing in the front lawn because I don't know what they are. I don't know what they're going to do. But if they showed no hostility whatsoever, then it's time to put the weapons down. It's okay to be cautious. I don't think there's anything wrong with protecting yourself. And maybe that's what he was getting at with that speech is, if we had to unite against some threat from outer space, okay. If it's a threat, we don't even know what that means.
If the only thing that can unite the world is a threat from outside, then we are not ready.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, we can't keep, Britney Spears and Paris Hilton out of the headlines, so I don't think we're ready for shit, to be honest with you.
That's true.
But yeah, that was kind of my explanation of my stance on that. Most listeners know by now, I don't think that the government knows much more than we do, and I certainly don't. I certainly don't think that there's going to be any massive disclosure or a top-down revelation of some sort. That's just not going to happen, and it's not going to happen for probably a variety of reasons. But the most important one I can think of is, it would essentially be the end of government. So at what point is government going to say, "Yep, we're done. I don't know what to tell you. They're here. We can't do anything." The end. Because at that point, it's just mass pandemonium. For me, it's a lot deeper. Everybody knows that. That's kind of been my stance for a long time. I just wanted to explain that. I wasn't trying to trick Angela into some kind of, corner with that. It was just, that's kind of how I view the whole exopolitical thing. It's like they're building this major diplomacy act on what exactly?
Well, please. That whole thing is a joke. If Stephen Bassett is going to say that Alfred Weber is the fringe when he's in fact the man who coined the term exopolitics, and he's the man who's winning the Lifetime Achievement Awards, it's like, well, then guess what, Steve-O? The whole thing is a charade.
Right.
Which we already know anyway, and it's just gratifying in some way to hear trash about Michael Salla because he is such a trashy guy.
Well, and what really gets me is about the whole exopolitical thing is like the X conference. I think you said before, why isn't there any experiencers up there talking about this stuff? Why is that not a part of the equation for them? And I've said for at least a decade or more that this disclosure thing that everybody's clamoring for is already going on. And it is gradual, or at least it seems to be, because this whole thing is not. In every way that the phenomenon itself, it defies the laws of physics. It defies the laws of what we deem to be reality. It's doing the exact same thing when it comes to contact of some sort. It's evading the official channels. It's going right to the individual, and disclosure's happening right there. I don't think.
Well, here's the problem, though. We say that as though they're going to invite you or I up on stage. No, if they did have experiencers on there, it would be like Stan Romanek and Jim Sparks. And then we'd be bitching about that.
It would have to be, it would have to be newsworthy experiencers, I guess. But I don't really give a crap who it is, as long as it's somebody. With an ounce of credibility, I'm good with that. I don't think I'd want it to be me, but because I'm whacked out as far as I would blow the entire thing for the extraterrestrial crowd. So it would be a kind of like Bassett would have to be my apologist when I got done talking and saying, but if even one UFO that Jeff has seen was extraterrestrial, that's what we're after. To me, it is to me, and has been for a long time, evading the official channels and going right to the individual, and that's how I think disclosure is going to happen. It's eventually just going to be something everyone knows. It's not going to be this revelation at a given point in time. I think it's part of how this whole thing is evolving. It's just becoming more and more apparent and evident to people. And the only people not acknowledging it are people in official channels because maybe they don't know. But anyway.
It's a good way to think about it.
I guess.
Yeah, and as far as CNN showing up and all that, in one sense, to the exo-political press conferences, Angela's right that, she's right that not a lot is becoming of it, right?
Right?
But on the other hand, not a lot of it needs to, because all it really serves is Stephen Bassett to be able to go back to his money people, his constituents, or whatever you want to call them, his financial backers, and say, look, I was on CNN, so we're getting somewhere, so give me more money for more X conferences.
Yeah.
So it's not as though he needs to go on there and knock it out of the park and have CNN talking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks. He just needs to appear on TV so he can collect his money.
Right. Well, there is nothing to knock out of the park. That's the other part.
Well, I think after years of doing the X conference, he's got to know that that's the only function of doing those press conferences.
Well, certainly. Yeah.
It's not to get wide public exposure. It's to get enough exposure to bring to financial backers to perpetuate the cycle of X conferences.
I heard Angela mention something about him releasing press releases at 3 o'clock. Well, who gets those?
Right.
You never hear about the X conference until one is ramping up to go, and then you hear about it for a couple days afterwards, and it disappears for next time. Yeah. Just like any other conference.
Look, he said he had inside information that there's going to be disclosure, this month, right?
Yep.
And it didn't happen, or it hasn't happened yet, and he, of course, didn't disclose who that is, and nobody, of course, has asked him.
Right.
And we don't have him on our show, so we're not going to ask him.
Right.
But if there is another show out there listening, you should ask Steve Bassett who his source is.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe we should have him on.
Yeah, I don't
know. Never mind.
What good will come of it, honestly? We'll bash him. We've seen that. Been there, done that.
Yeah. Well, we don't really. I think we've addressed more personalities in this show than we have, which I guess every now and then you have to touch upon being involved in this stuff. But I don't know. I'd prefer to stick with the phenomena itself and see where we go from there. So anyway, next show, George Hansen, right?
That's right.
Excellent. You know?
This will be your therapy. This will be your walking up to somebody and saying, "I'm experienced."
Right. I need to get a couch in the broadcast booth here. So yeah, we'll be right on for that. From here, we bid you good week, good day, good night, and good luck.